welcome everybody to Two Drunk Dudes in a Gun Room.
Brought to you by Savoy Army Entertainment.
This is Don.
And Doug.
Hey, today we're going to do some story time, man. We got an interesting story with veteran Kevin Frey. Served with us in the Army. He was a first responder prior to the military, came in the military, served, got out, and is still a first responder. So I know we are going to get some awesome stories out of this.
Was not a first responder in the Army, though.
He was not. He was a mechanic in the Army.
He was a gearhead.
Yep. Like which was even more interesting. Hey, Kevin, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you came about to what you're doing?
So I currently work as a critical care paramedic, so that's about as high as I can go as far as paramedicine goes, short of being a rotorhead and go flight, which I'm way too fat to do now.
Amen. We all are.
Yep.
So I do all the ground stuff now. I enjoy EMS. Best way to explain it is hours of boredom. So you can watch all the movies you want to watch, followed by a few minutes of chaos.
Yeah.
I joined the Army after being a first responder, being an EMT, because, well, there was jack shit to do up where I'm from. So I joined the military. Well, the military thought I was stupid. So they were like, well, your choices are you can be a mechanic or you could be a mechanic. So I'm like, well,
fuck it. About us,
right? We're on the lower end of the spectrum.
We outranked him, but he still looked down.
So apparently,
secretly looked down to us.
Yeah.
So yeah, apparently you have to have a higher score to be a medic in the military than you do to be a mechanic, which I'm pretty sure if you can be a mechanic, you can be a medic.
Yeah, I met some not so smart medics.
Yeah, I still find them every day.
So that was the reason for, I'm assuming your initial intent when you came in was to be a medic, and you were forced not to be then. Okay.
Yep.
I know. Yeah. I mean, I'm blessed that worked out, because otherwise I probably would have never met you. But I know when we were deployed, man, I heard some of the funniest stories that I have ever heard in my life. A guy coming from high school into the military in our field would never have the life stories that Kevin has had.
Oh, no, absolutely. No.
The rides I took with him in a Hemet Wrecker. I know if I tell the dog story, PETA will be all over our asses, but let's just say, thank God the IEDs were not on the shoulder that day. Kevin, can we talk? The one story that sticks through my mind, man, and the world has to hear it. They've got to hear the story about when you got the call to go help somebody and it came through on your phone instead of the radio. You got to tell everybody the story, man, because I've told it 100 times, but you tell it way better.
So EMS, we almost always work as crews of two. We always carry a pager. So typically when we get paged, that's usually the way we find out about our calls. So if you're hanging around, then you hear a really loud noise, and then somebody starts talking to you. And it usually gives you your call information. Well, it didn't happen for this call. My phone rang, and they're like, hey, you need to go to this address because there's something wrong. And we're like, well, what is it? And she's like, well, I don't really want to tell you. And we're like, well, what do you mean? Like, obviously somebody called you to tell you. And she's like, yeah, so it'll be way more entertaining for you guys if you just show up and find out. And this is our medicine. This is dispatch. This is who tells us all of this stuff and keeps us safe and gets cops and all these other people that we might need to show up. And we're like,
dispatch didn't want to address it over the radio.
No, not at all. So we're like, all right. So we get in the truck and we go over there and we knock on the door. And from inside, we hear like a come in, except it was a female's voice. And we're like, all right, well, this is weird. So we come walking in, we got our bags. We're like, we have no idea what we're walking into. We've been doing it for a while. So we just kind of walk in like, oh, nothing really serious. I mean, just dispatch being weird. No, it was definitely not that case. So we get this like, she's 16 years old. She is butt ass naked. She's spread eagle. And she has the most god awful look on her face. And she's like, oh, you guys got to help me. We're like, with what? We're gonna go to jail. Like, what are we doing? So she's like, I have something stuck in me. And we're like, what? Like, we're thinking, okay, maybe you got stabbed. We have no idea what it is. We're like, what do you mean you have something stuck in me? And she's like, no, I have something stuck in me. And we're like, where? Because we're not seeing anything. And she's like, I have my mom's vibrator stuck up in my vagina. And we're like, wait, what? At this point, my partner's like, I'm out. Well, you can't leave me here. We're an all-male crew. Like, we have no idea what's going to happen here. He's like, well, let's make a phone call. So we go in through our assessment, and she's like, no, you don't understand. It's battery operated, and it's getting really hot. And we're like, oh, well, either one of us want to, like, we're not going fishing. So we do. And she's like, no, like it's burning. And we're like, all right. So he calls the ER doc. And he's like, hey, what do you want us to do? And he's like, well, just try to pull it out. And I'm like, wait, no, we never pull anything out. Like, this is like, number one, again, all male crew. Number two, she's 16. Like,
Bry's like, I ain't got a pull-out game. You know how many kids I have?
Our job's done. It's inserted.
So he's like, he talks to the doc's like, yeah, you're gonna have to pull it out, otherwise it's gonna continue to burn her and blah blah blah. So he looks at me, hands me McGill forceps, and he's like, it's all you, buddy. No, I'm just an EMT. You're a paramedic. This seems way above my level. Nope, it's all you.
Meanwhile, she's getting Duracelled.
So we get her to try to open herself up so we can see what we're trying to find. So I find the very end of it. You can just see the very end of it. So I grab a hold of it with these forceps. And so I'm trying to take it out. And as I'm removing it, she decides this is the most perfect time to climax. And she stuck that thing back up into her. And I'm like, oh fuck, I'm really going to jail now. There's no way.
Yeah, man. I mean, you should have known though before you grabbed it. You should have asked what kind of batteries was in it. Because if it was that rabbit, it's just going to keep coming and coming. I mean, or is it going and I don't remember which one it is. Man, that story made me laugh. I think that story got me through Iraq.
What the hell?
Every time I rode with him, man, I said, man, you're going to be telling stories all night. I got to hear
it. Did I tell you whose vibrator it was, Don?
What? It was, no.
So we're on our way to the hospital. So we get it removed, and we're like, all right, that's probably the weirdest thing I've ever done in EMS. Like, we'll put that at the top of this list. And we're like, so curiosity, like, whose was that? Oh, it was my mom's.
Keep it in the family. Keep it in the family, man.
Yeah. So we get her into the hospital, and we're trying to be real discreet because the hospitals, I mean, it's big city, the hospital's always busy, and we're like, hey, so like she's got some burns and like inside of her. And the nurse is like, oh, okay. She's like, well, has her mom been called? And we're like, well, we tried to call her mom, but her mom didn't answer. She's like, oh, well, I'll call her. So the nurse is on the phone with her mom, and she's like, yeah, so we're going to need you to come in for your daughter. She's in the ER. And she's like, what do you mean she's in the ER? And so the nurse is trying to be real discreet, like, well, she's got some burns, and like, you really probably should just come into the ER and we'll tell you the story here. And she's like, you could tell the nurse is getting more and more annoyed because the mom's just like, no, I just want to know I need to know what's going on. And then all of a sudden, nowhere, this nurse is like, your daughter had your vibrator in her pussy. Now she's got third-degree burns in it.
Oh, shit.
Jeez.
Oh no.
Yeah, man. I learned my lesson. I don't fuck with nurses, medics, doctors anymore because they will turn your shit on you and fuck you up. Yeah. I learned that the hard way with my vasectomy. I'm nope, no longer will I ever fuck with those guys again. I'm a lot more patient when I go now.
I fuck with nurses all the time. It's just entertaining. My favorite joke to tell a nurse is, hey, do you know what RN stands for? What? Really nothing.
Really nothing. You just now get to tell people to change the bedpan instead of having to change the bedpan.
Oh, see, that's why I work in EMS. Oh, you got to pee? Better hold it.
Yeah.
I don't work in an ER. Nope.
No, I don't blame you, man. So, I know your first. Where was it that you was? What city was that you was in before you came in the military?
So I worked out in the Twin Cities. So Minneapolis.
That's what I thought it was, the Twin Cities, right? Yeah. So I'm assuming you probably were shot at more at the Twin Cities than you were in Iraq.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, yeah. I think so.
I did a lot of inner city stuff in the cities.
You had experience wearing flak vests before even coming to Iraq, so you were like, "Yeah, this is nothing. I wore this every day."
Yeah, our stuff was more like the cops' bulletproof vests, so it probably didn't work anyways.
Yeah, probably.
He probably looked at our combat lifesaver bags and be like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, no shit.
Really?
This ain't nothing.
I'm supposed to do what with this?
Yeah.
That wasn't shit.
No.
Especially after they took the IVs out of that motherfucker.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It really wasn't nothing there.
Yeah.
They should have known if they're going to hand us IVs and we're hungover, we're going to use them. Yeah. Absolutely. So, what did you think was more exciting? Was it the time in combat or your daily job as EMS? What gave you that bigger adrenaline rush?
I think EMS does.
Yeah.
Quite honestly. Iraq just gets kind of mundane after, a while. It's just you wake up, go to work, come home, and do whatever.
That's how I explain it to people.
Are you saying pain didn't keep it entertaining?
Well, I mean, he did, but you had to watch out for when you were lower enlisted from that guy because he'd be like, just pop out of nowhere. You're like, huh.
He just retired too.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I tell people, man. You get up, you go to work, you stay alive, you go home, you wash, rinse, repeat. That is deployment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and I tell people, after like the fourth or fifth week that you're there, that whole like I could possibly die here, that thought just kind of fades away.
It does until you see it.
Yeah, until you get blown
until you see somebody getting carried out or something, and then it hits home again, and it brings that whole thought about, oh shit, this is dangerous. Because you're absolutely right. You'll run 30 convoys, nothing happened, running the same routes, and then finally an IED or something will happen, and you get complacent, because it's not like EMS where every call you get that same adrenaline rush, you're going on mission. You just get to the point where you're going on mission, and a lot of us deployed so much. It was like that with family members too. The first few deployments, they cried when you left. And by the last one, they didn't even get out of bed,
Yeah.
They're like, hey, lock the door on your way out.
Hey, see you when you get back.
Yeah, man. You know, the thing that I never thought of as a paramedic, man, was it seemed like when you work in these big cities, you have to not only know medicine, but you got to know tactical shit too. You know, like when you told me stories about when you get calls with gang shootings and you get there and there's two different gangs both standing on the corner and you can't go help either one of them because the other one will shoot you for helping the other one before their guy. You know, so you got to wait till the cops get there. You know, how many stories a day do you have of that stuff, man? When you know you're just like stuck there watching people die, and your whole job is to keep them alive. You know, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the cities is. I mean, I no longer work in the city. That's just something that just not the medicine side of it just isn't there for me.
Right.
So that like putting the puzzle together and doing the actual medicine side isn't really in the cities, which is why I work rural EMS because I have 40-minute transports.
Yeah.
So you really have to kind of know your shit to do it in the rural communities. But I work with on a reservation now. My full-time job has a huge reservation in it. And there's still things. My buddy was like, "Oh my God, how could you work on a reservation?" And I'm like, "I don't know. How do you work in an inner city?"
Yeah, no shit.
I'll press this because I mean the violence and things that you see in the inner cities, I still see it on the res. It's just not as common, but the threat level of the patients and the family and things that we see there is still it's still just as prevalent as it was working in an inner city.
So reservations are just as bad, huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Sawyer County, where I work, the entire county, it's the third biggest county in Wisconsin. We only have, I think we have less than 10 cops on in the entire county at any given time.
Wow.
Yeah. The way all are though. All reservations are short manned of cops and EMTs.
Undermanned. And then the drug cartels use them for the hub points to transfer their drugs around because they know they're understaffed for cops. And so we see drug overdoses and all sorts of stuff all the time.
Are you guys seeing a lot of problems with fentanyl like you see on the news, or is that more of a news highlight thing?
I think that's more of a news spin. The whole like if you touch fentanyl with your hand, it's going to absorb in and you're going to have an overdose. I've never personally have seen that happen. I've never read an article yet where it shows that has truly happened. I think a lot of times what cops do is they just touch random stuff and then they rub their faces and rub their eyes and their nose, so they're absorbing it through their eyes or sniffing it through their nose, and that's where they're ingesting it. But I've never seen anybody or read an article where, and I've heard things from pharmacists that are like, yeah, you can't really absorb fentanyl through the skin. Like you can, but not at the amount where you're going to have an issue with it.
So all these kids and stuff that are dying from fentanyl, is it because drug dealers are putting it in the drugs, or?
Yep. So drug dealers are cutting their meth and pretty much anything else, coke and crack and everything else with fentanyl now. So
because it's cheap to get, or what's the reason for
it? Yeah. It heightens that ability for them to get a high. Meth is the big one that they're cutting it with because you get two different separate highs from it. You get the kind of like the euphoric high from the fentanyl, and then you get the meth high, which just makes you batshit crazy.
Right.
So we'll show up with our patients who are not breathing because they've overdosed on fentanyl, and then give them Narcan, and then they wake up fucking crazy, and they'll put them back to sleep with ketamine.
you always got a cocktail, man. you're like, wake up, Karen. Oh fuck, go to sheet, Steve, and back to sleep you go, man.
Well, I woke up one patient. She woke up. She was violent as hell. There's two cops, and my EMT partner was holding him down. She bit my partner's finger, and I'm like, "Fuck this!" Like, I'm putting her back to sleep. So I walked out to truck, got my ketamine, came back in, and I'm like, "Nighty night." Gave her 500 milligrams of ketamine.
Hell yeah, man. So y'all are seeing some fentanyl
we'll
problem.
Yeah.
No. So y'all
Yeah,
are seeing that with drugs and stuff though up there.
Yep. Yeah, we see.
Well,
I mean, we see a
meth
ton of
problem
drugs.
here, right?
Yeah. Well, Missouri in general.
Missouri in general,
is,
meth problem.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Meth is super cheap to get now, and it's all coming up from Mexico.
Well, and not
Super,
to mention, I mean, like here is just a bunch of backwood people
Breaking
making it
Bad
themselves.
motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they could not pass the ASVAB, but they can cook some fucking meth. You know, and you're probably not getting. You're probably not getting the purest stuff or the safest stuff. You're probably getting shake and bake shit. But yeah, I mean it's prevalent.
You get shit that was made in the truck, 2-liter bottles.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what a lot of it is. You know, it is crazy, man. You know, and I'm sure it's like that because I know it's like this with the mechanics, right? But the difference between how the Army treats a med, because I assume an Army medic would be comparable to probably an EMT or something like that in the civilian world, but the skills that are taught, I think, are complete different levels. You know, I don't think the Army medics get the same amount of training. They get how to read a book and follow a flow chart. You know,
there's only a few of them that get to go to like EMT school, and that's when the unit pays for it.
Right.
Too. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's not all of them that get that training.
No.
Yeah.
And so it's the same way in the Army. You know, an Army mechanic gets out, and we're just not up to the same technology as what's out there in the civilian world. So I'm sure it's the same for you. You know, getting a new EMT to come in and work for you that just came out of the Army. You're probably like, yeah, I know all the bad habits you're fixing to have.
What Charlie company did you come from?
Yeah. So my biggest contention with military medics. So in the Army, they all have to be NREMT. So they're all nationally registered EMTs, which is the same test that I had to take when I went to EMT, back to EMT school when I got out. The problem is that their huge focus is solely trauma.
Yeah.
And so all of these states that were like, hey, look, you have an EMT license or you're NREMT certified out of the military, we'll let you ride on an ambulance. Well, that's all fine and dandy, except for the fact that they don't know what the signs and symptoms of a stroke are.
Right. Yeah.
And that was my biggest thing. I'm like, yeah, you're great with traumas. Great. Yeah. But traumas only make up like 10% of everything that I really do. 90% of it is medical calls, your falls, your cardiacs, your strokes, your diabetics.
Yep.
And so military really doesn't set their medics up for that idea of the medical side of it. It's really just that big focus on trauma.
Yeah. Well, I think it was last deployment, like it was like everything was throw a tourniquet on it, throw a tourniquet on it, throw a tournament on it, even the convoy briefs, throw a tourniquet on it, throw a tourniquet on it. It was just like, but they, have a possibility of keeping their arm. Should we not put a tourniquet on there? Throw a tourniquet on it. It's like, okay.
Well, I mean, the Army only deals with trauma because if you go to sick call for being sick, you're faking it. So I mean, there's no sense in knowing any of that shit.
The Ranger candy.
Yep.
Ibuprofen.
Yep. Motrin back to work, buddy.
It only took the Army 2.5 years to figure out what was wrong with my leg. So
absolutely
nothing.
Yeah. It wasn't trauma.
Right, that's
man.
what it was.
It was not trauma.
I mean,
yeah, that's what it was until they figured it out. And then they're like, "Oh shit, there is something wrong with you. Now what do we do?"
Yeah, yep. So I'm gonna give you your opportunity, man. What is your most favorite story to tell from either one, Army or paramedic side, man?
So my favorite story to tell is for my part-time job, we crashed an ambulance. And that is my most fun story to tell. So we'll go with that story.
All right.
So This was the day before Christmas Eve. And so it had started to rain. And then the rain turned freezing rain, which then turned to sleet, which then started to snow. So everybody in our area in that county was busy. And so we're sitting at the station and we're like, oh man, we're next. Like, we're the only truck available left. And we get paged. And we get paged to a town that's like 20 miles away. And so we get in the truck, and my partner looks at me and he's like, do you think we should turn the lights and sirens on because we have so far to go? And I'm like, hell no. Like, we ain't forcing people off the road in this kind of weather. Like, fuck no. So we're tootling. We're just cruising, keeping up with traffic. Dispatcher's like, where are you? And we're like, roads are shitty. Like, we're gonna get there when we get there. We'll deal with whatever's there. If he dies before we get there, we'll just deal with a dead person. Like, not a big deal to us. So we're cruising down the road, and he's talking. We're talking. Roads are really crappy. There's cars in front of us. We're doing like, I don't know, 30 miles an hour maybe. And then we see brake lights. And I'm like, and then he brakes. And then the cars in front of us are sliding. We're sliding. They stop sliding. We're still sliding. And then we continue to slide right into the back of a Jeep.
Oh, shit.
Oh, no.
now you have more casualties to deal with.
Now you got another call.
Which then the Jeep ends up sliding into the back of an Impala. And I'm sitting there like, how in the fuck? So I look at the Jeep. I look at my partner. I look back at the Jeep. I look back at him, and I'm like, how the fuck did you do that? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, get out and go make sure they're okay. I got phone calls to make. We were about to leave. The other crew was about to leave for a transfer. So I'm like, hey, dude, like, let me call them quick. Now I got to call the manager quick. So I'm sitting in the truck. It's still running. It's still snowing like a bastard. I call my other paramedic that was on the other crew, and I'm like, hey, man, have you left on that transfer yet? He's like, no. And I'm like, oh, thank God. We just wrecked, which is a 1050. I was like, we just got in a 1050. And he's like, okay, well, I'll call the hospital back. I'll just tell them we can't go. I'm like, oh, cool, thanks. So then I call the boss, and I'm like, hey, so we just wrecked. And she's like, yeah, I know. I just heard it on the radio. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, well, as I'm talking to her, the snow that is accumulating underneath the windshield wiper is now changing colors. And I'm like, well, that's an interesting colored snow. So I kind of dip down and look, because the hood's like all bent up from the deer catcher and whatnot. And there's a fire.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh shit. Like, so I reach over and turn the truck off. I'm like, we'll just start with that. So I get out of the truck. I'm like, she's like, yep, just, whenever you get everything wrapped up. I'm like, okay. So I get out of the truck and I just start walking away. I'm like, I ain't dealing with this. I'm not a fireman. So my partner starts walking at me, and I'm like, hey, dude, truck's on fire. And I just keep walking. And then I'm like, where did he go? So I turned around, and he did like the little Scooby-Doo zoinks. Like, I'm pretty sure he's a big guy. I'm pretty sure he levitated like 4 inches off the ground when and then he yelled out, the truck's on fire, and proceeds to start running towards the truck, which then in my fucked up mind, all I hear now is the Fireman Sam song, which is a cartoon off of Netflix or off of Amazon. That's what comes into my head. And I'm like, oh God, why? Then he proceeds to puts out the fire. He comes back. He's like, dude, did you know the truck was on fire? I'm like, hell yeah, man. I told you when I walked by you. He's like, why didn't you put it out? And I'm like, oh, let the bitch burn.
The patient ain't in the back no more. It's all good.
So, whoa. Was your boss happy after that?
Oh, no, she was not. Well, the story continues because she calls us and she's like, oh, hey, you have to go do a piss test because you crashed. And I'm like, okay, well, where? And she's still, it's the next town over, but it's the next day. And I'm like, all right, well, that seems weird, but okay. She's like, it's at 9:30. You and him will just take another truck, go down there. pee in a cup, and come back. And I'm like, cool. All right. So I get up. We get there at 9:30. They call me back. I prepared for this shit like a Boy Scout. Like I drank like 2 liters of water, a bunch of Gatorade. I'm like, I know what piss tests are like.
Oh yeah.
I'm not gonna wait on this. Like, so I go in. It took me longer to take all my crap out of my pockets than it did for me to pee in the cup.
Yeah.
Well, at least to fill it. Then it took me another 8 minutes to actually empty the rest of the bladder. So like, well, so I come walking out, and she's like, "Wow, you're in there for a long time." I'm like, "Yeah, I probably drank way more than I really needed to." And she's like, "Well, at least it was quick." I'm like, "Cool." So I put all my stuff back in my pocket. And this is, keep in mind, this is like mid-COVID, so you had to get your whole screening just to get into the clinic.
Yeah.
So I come walking out. I sit back down in the waiting room. He gets called back, and I'm like, "Okay, shouldn't be too long, I don't think." So he gets called back at like 10 minutes to 10. Well, 10 o'clock rolls, it's gone. 10:15 comes and goes. 10:30 comes and goes. And I'm like, what the fuck is he? Did he miss the cup? What is he doing?
He was that guy that's trying to make it last all damn day.
Right? And I'm like, oh, this is annoying. So I get up and move to another spot in the waiting room because there's more and more people that are coming in and surrounding me. And I'm like, I don't want to hang out where all these people are. So I moved to a different spot. So about 11 o'clock or so, he comes rolling out. And I'm like, finishing up whatever I was doing on my phone. And he comes up to me like, I've been inconveniencing him this whole fucking time. Are you ready? Uh, I've been ready for like an hour. Like, what the hell? So we go out to the truck. He calls our boss and he's like, oh, hey, like, I couldn't pee in a cup. Like, I just couldn't go. Wait, what? What do you mean? I've been down here for an hour and a half now and you still can't? Like, what is wrong with you? Like, you normally pee every 30 minutes anyways. Now all of a sudden you got to pee in a cup and you can't.
This
Like,
motherfucker's hot.
Right? And so our boss tells them, she's like, well, you need to call them back and see how long they're going to be there. Otherwise, you're going to get kicked off the schedule and you can't work and blah, blah, blah. So we go to Quick Trip, which is our local gas station. And he's still on the phone with her. And I'm like, well, fuck this. I'm getting breakfast. So I walk in there, I get a bunch of stuff. He comes out. He's got a 64-ounce Mountain Dew, Code Red Mountain Dew, and 2 Arizona tea rehabs.
Oh, he's making damn sure he can't pee.
And he proceeds to drink all of it. And I'm like, but you're diabetic. Like, oh, your diabetes will love you later. I was
wow.
Like, Code Red Mountain Dew, that's a lot of sugar right there, just on its own.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So we go back. We pull in and he looks at me. He's like, are you going to go in? Fuck no. He's like, why not? Because I can't watch porn in there. I can watch porn in the truck.
He wants you to sing to him.
So he walks back in. It's like 11:15. He comes out 12:15. And I'm like, this is fucking annoying. I'm like, I'm annoyed. So we start leaving. And he's still driving. He starts sliding through an intersection. So he goes in the ditch. Keep in mind, I'm talking to my wife this whole time. And I'm like, yeah, so I wait for this so-and-so to pee in a cup forever. And she's like, oh, really? And so we stop in the snowbank. And I'm like, dude, you better not get us stuck. I no more finish that. And we get rear-ended.
No kidding.
Yeah. So I'm on the phone with Becca and I'm like, hey, I gotta fucking go. And she's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, seriously, dude? 2 in 16 hours? Really?
Yeah, there's no way you have a job after this.
So he gets out, talks to the driver. He's got like a little piece missing out of his bumper. He's like, oh, we're just gonna go to the Ace Hardware store and we're gonna exchange insurance cards. And I'm like, no, we're not. We're gonna go to the Ace Hardware store and we're gonna have to call the cops because they gotta do a report. No, they don't. And he proceeds to argue with me about this. And I'm like, dude, no. Like, we're an emergency fucking vehicle. Like, we have to have a police report. No, 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 no. So then he calls our boss and she's like, oh yeah, no, you have to have a police report. And I'm like, see, Good told you.
I guess it technically wasn't his fault since he got rear-ended, but
I don't know. He was driving, so I don't give a shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So he did piss the second time, though.
No, well, yeah. When we went back, well, I asked my boss after we got rear-ended if I had to go back and pee in a cup again. Like, am I gonna have to go and pee in a cup or again? You know, there's been that 2 hours since the first time I did. Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
You might have lit up a joint after the piss test, man. Right? So is he still employed?
He is, yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, and a couple of weeks before that, he'd actually hit a deer. So I actually gave him a certificate of achievement for 3 ambulance accidents in 21 days.
Wow. Holy shit. His nickname is Crash or something.
Have you put in a transfer for a different driver?
Yeah, he's part-time, so he hasn't been around very much lately. So
thank God. Yeah. The vehicles are saying thank God.
Right. Yeah, I came to work with 1 ambulance accident that shift and left with 3.
Yeah. So what about as far as like veteran calls, man? Have you had any PTSD situations and stuff like that up there where you at?
Yeah, there's a couple veterans that we've had up here. We're pretty sparse up here, so there's not a whole lot of veterans up here.
Right.
There's a lot of like old veterans, like your Vietnam era veterans, Korean War veterans. Not a whole lot of like our era veterans.
Right.
You that I've seen, they're not. I've had one guy that had PTSD really bad. Had a dog, he beat the hell out of his dog because that's what it was there for. That's what he claims.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I didn't really know that was what that was for, but okay. We brought him into the ER. So I stayed in the back of the truck with him, talked with him the entire trip in. It was like probably a 20-minute drive. Mm-hmm. And actually ended up filing a complaint about the nurse because she asked me, well, what'd you bring him here for? And my response, probably less than professional, was like, because I didn't know Subway took patients.
What was her response?
She didn't know what to say. It was actually quite funny. That was one of my patients. My other Iraqi Afghan vet, he tried to commit suicide, and I don't know if he flinched or whatnot, but ended up missing. Still had a lot of injuries to his face. We talked to him all the way up to the helicopter and loaded him on the helicopter, and they flew him out, and he's still around. I see him every once in a while. I go back for him. But yeah, not a whole lot of vets up here that are our age. There's just not a lot of like good quality jobs up here.
Yeah. I even though you don't hear about it a lot, but I think a lot of I think the same thing happened with the era of the Vietnam veteran. I don't think any of us was really old enough to see that generation from World War II and Korea get affected by it, because I don't think it happens to the older people as much as that. What is it? Probably 5 to 10 year age after the military, after the situation. It seems to be the most prevalent of when life is at its worst, Mm-hmm. I think once you get old, you just finally get to that point where you're like, fuck it,
Fuck them all.
Yeah, so there's some big studies on the whole PTSD, and they're really looking at the whole like prolonged symptomatic PTSD people. Mm-hmm. There wasn't really a whole lot of research, and the VA used to be like, well, if you don't have PTSD right now, you just ain't got it. And that used to be a big claim. But they're looking at almost 25% of people that have PTSD won't show symptoms until years later.
Yeah.
Which is pretty significant. I think the last numbers I saw even for veterans was talking anywhere from 40 to 60% of all combat vets will have PTSD. And that was a pretty light study. They really didn't go much into detail. And my expectation or my thoughts probably is that's much higher than that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, for me, it was like things just gradually kept getting worse and worse, you know, and I didn't even realize that I had the problem. You know, I just felt like everybody else had a problem, not me. You know,
I still feel that
way. Yeah, and
yeah, I've
you
been
know,
there.
it just finally came to a boiling point. You know, one day, and I think, you know, after I got help, I really didn't get help to deal with the problem, but I've gotten enough help to where I now know how to get myself out of situations when things are getting bad. You know, I can feel things coming on, and I go find my own quiet place and just stay away from people. You
Right.
know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I could completely see that where it doesn't have, you know, you don't. I ain't gonna say that they don't have the symptoms, but they don't notice it. You know, and I think
Yeah.
part of that could be just deployments. Life is so hectic, man. You know, every day is a different day.
Yep, and that's what they're linking it to. They're linking it to that kind of that busybody kind of attitude. You know, you're always moving around, and as long as you're kind of, per se, for lack of a better way of saying it, but in the game, you know, you're in the military, you're doing your thing, you're going back and forth, doing, you know, trainings, going back to war, going back to home, going back to training, going back to war. It's just that, you know, wash, rinse, repeat over and over and over. So your mind is continuously just in that game, and then you get out and the game's over. Yeah, and then then your mind starts slowing down because you're no longer doing this. Hey, let's get up at 5 o'clock in the morning because I got to go do PT, and then, you know, in PT ends, we're gonna go smoke outside Dougie's truck, and then we're gonna go back and do whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you are absolutely right. You know, and even in the days that are down days when you're over there, you know, your focus is still trying to improve your foxhole, and you're fixing something.
Right. Yeah.
You're changing something, but everything's geared towards survival and living to the next day. You know.
Well, our decade too. You knew you were going back. You just didn't know when.
Yeah.
You knew you'd be back, especially if you toured. You know, the Marne train did not stop.
No.
So like you knew your ass would end up back. You just didn't know when. So,
yeah. And EMS isn't any different. So they're talking almost the same numbers for EMS for PTSD. And
I could believe it.
The downside is that EMS folks a lot of us refuse to go and get help for it. I mean, I do. One of my favorite subjects to talk about when I teach is provider health. When we talk about our mental health issues and not seeking help and what to do when you start noticing you have that. And then my other favorite topic I talk about is psych night. So when we talk about psychology, you know, both of those things are not about the medicine. And EMS, we're all about the medicine. You know, go out and help your community.
Yeah.
It's not a Chicago Fire thing where we're out saving a life every day, but you're definitely out there helping your community every day.
Absolutely.
And so EMS has those same numbers with PTSD and those same numbers with mental health, other mental health issues, you know, the things that we do see. You know, just yesterday, my other crew, the South crew, went to a patient that had been, you know, deceased for quite a while. We're talking several weeks.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we see that we're like, oh, you know, it doesn't really bother me because, you know, it's not really my emergency. And, you know, we know play that game and be like, well, it's not my emergency, so what do I care? But really all it is just suppressing those emotions. And that, how do you deal with this stuff? Because, you know, 30 years from now, if I'm not picking up, you know, patients off the floor and I'm retired, not doing anything, are the things that we're not dealing with today going to sneak up on you? And then how do you deal with it when you don't have the resources or don't even know where the resources to begin with are?
Yeah. And it will happen. I mean, that's a perfect example right there of what happens to vets, you know, and you don't never know what's going to trigger, what's going to set it off. And it, like you said, it just happens.
Becca will kick his ass. So.
Oh yeah.
That girl kick his ass.
Yeah, if she wakes up and she's in a tourniquet, and he's doing CPR compressions on her, yeah, she'll be pissed.
It's probably the only couple that says, "Tie me to the bed," and they break out 4 tourniquets and shit. You know, it's just like, what the fuck are you guys doing? She's probably sitting next to him right now. fucking dying.
Actually, she's walked away.
Oh, is she?
Uh-huh.
I could completely see that.
Well, if Becca's tying me to the bed with 4 tourniquets and Doug's asking us what the hell we're doing, we got other problems.
Hey.
Absolutely.
What the fuck are you doing here?
Where did he put the camera?
Hey, you never turned your camera off. How's that working? Tying you to the desk or wherever the fuck you're at right now.
Oh man,
she probably has PTSD from putting up with his ass.
Well, it goes back to like what you said. Family members get they get our PTSD.
Oh yeah, like my kids got PTSD from my PTSD. Yeah.
So do you think the PTSD for first responders is different as far as symptomatic? I mean, do you think they have the dreams and stuff like some veterans do, or?
Yeah, I think it's a little different as far as like what they're seeing,
right?
As far as, traumatic stuff, but the signs and the symptoms for PTSD are exactly the same. Doesn't necessarily the traumatic event that caused it doesn't necessarily matter, or the that caused it, but the symptoms of it are exactly the same.
Yeah,
it's like I have the PTSD stuff from the military, and then I have things that I still experience from EMS that I deal with, and the things that I deal with, as far as PTSD on both sides are exactly the same as far as the symptoms and stuff go.
Yeah, I believe I can see that. I mean, you remember, I don't remember how long ago, it was years ago, but you remember that SF team that came home and one by one they slowly killed their family and themselves. Yeah. It was like a total like a SF team of like 7 people, man. I never did hear whether it was related to combat or if it was related to something else, but I have a hard time believing that there was 7 SF guys that came home all to find out their wives were cheating on them or something like that. So I do believe it was PTSD, related, especially that time frame.
I'm sure it was. So.
Yeah, it had to be. But yeah, I mean, I could see it being a little bit different as far as how the individuals react. You know what I mean? I think the dreams and the internal feelings are the same, and maybe some of the more violent outrages that come probably are more on the military side, because that's just how we dealt with life in general. Was through shooting and violence and whatever.
Yeah, escalate the violence. So I'm more violent than you.
Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah.
That's the military in a nutshell. I'll match your violence and then escalate it a little bit more.
Yeah.
As long as I shoot you before you shoot me, the life's grand for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And the hard part of the thing that first responders, when you start dealing with car accident scenes that's got 3-year-olds in the back and shit like that, man, you can't tell me that doesn't create PTSD, man. Especially when you see it over and over and over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the unfortunate side is EMS is such a small community. I mean, we're just as small as the military community is.
Right. Yeah.
When I start talking to people about, we talk about networking out, that big thing that we all learned when we were getting out of the military. Network. When I start thinking about all the people that have networked out since coming back into the EMS world, and I'm like, man, I span over like 8 different states, and I have people everywhere. I got people that are managers now. I know people that are, teaching. I know people that are not in EMS. I know ones that have gone to med school. The downside is EMS is a really hard career. I mean, we talk about things like 25% turnover rate every year for EMS providers, which is an incredibly high number when you start comparing it to other professions.
Yeah.
Paramedics is the big one, 25% turnover rate, and almost 40% of them are changing careers. And that's within, they say it takes 3 to 5 years to make a good paramedic before you're finally comfortable with what you know and how to do what you need to do.
You think it's because of the experience or because of the pay?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Pay, what we see, long hours, the stress of what we do. I think it's kind of a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah. I know for me, man, before I went in the Army, you know, and my original childhood dream reality set in that was never going to be happening. You know, I wanted to be a jockey, and that wasn't happening.
As soon as you hit 4'1", you're like, oh fuck.
Third grade. You know, I realized that wasn't happening. So I always thought about I always thought about being a cop. You know, and then I ended up realizing I was dumb, and so I went into the Army. And
turning wrenches
in the Army.
Yes.
And then I 20 years later I realized I no longer want to be a cop.
We're still dumb.
I've seen enough bad shit that I just don't really want to do anything. I just want I want to be that regular guy, you know. And I had a buddy of mine, man, he just kept hounding me to put in, because he'd been at the federal pen for like 30 years. And he's like, man, I can get you on. You should come out here. They're hiring. And I kept telling him, I said, dude, I've seen enough negative shit in my life. I don't care to have to look at every person at Walmart and say, oh, I remember when you were in. I know what you did. You know, I said, I've seen enough of that bullshit. And he finally just would not leave me alone. So I put my application in with my general discharge from the Army and, you know, all this bullshit. So, you know, I never even got a phone call, obviously, because I fucked up 90% of that application, you know, and I knew there was no way they were hiring me, no matter what he said.
They don't pay anyway.
They don't
pay shit.
No, you got to work like 150,000 hours a week, to get a livable check, you know, and even though Jessup's prison had a lot of history and old really bad guys, like mobster type guys, the reality is they're like 70 years old, and the new term criminal now is there for tax evasion and stupid shit, you know. So it wasn't even like a state ran prison. But dude, I just didn't want to see that stuff no more, man. That's why I bought a truck and ended up driving truck, you know.
Yeah, that's the bonus of what I do, because I see the kind of the shittier side of the world. But then, you know, that day that you take that cardiac arrest, no pulse, not breathing, and you get a spontaneous pulse back, and they're breathing and they're you know, have that pulse. I mean, there's no bigger rush than bringing somebody back from the dead.
Yeah, I could see that. Or giving a drug that puts them there, because they won't shut the hell up. Here's your ketamine, buddy.
No more talking. Ketamine.
Be quiet.
Man, I used to love the stories when he said he would get those calls, and he would just love ruining their highs, and they would come out and be like, Dick, do you know how much that shit costs? Yeah, man. You know, and it's always cool too to hear people that can go from the Army and the shit we've seen and still continue to serve the community
and stuff. Yep, absolutely.
You know, like myself, you know, a lot of people you just can't do it anymore, man. You're tired of it, you know. And I'll be honest, in today's age, I don't know how anybody could be a cop. I really don't.
Right.
I am with you. And I work with cops quite a bit, and the more that I work with them, the more gray area I see that they work in.
Yeah.
Like, this is what's getting you all in trouble. Like, it's not a black and white. It's like they go to law enforcement academy and they're taught all the gray areas of what they can and can't or could. Well, the law specifically says you can't do this, but you can do this. But it doesn't say that you really can't do this, which is really right in the middle. So that's where we operate. And I'm like, well, this is what's getting you all in trouble, is that gray area.
Well, it's because they're handicapped. I mean, they're told they're going to run a marathon. Oh, but by the way, can you tie one arm and one leg? You're only allowed to use one of each. You know, while everybody else you're going against can use wheelchairs, cars, and Ferraris. You know, whatever it takes. You know, and same with military. I mean, if you really function by your rules of engagement and and Geneva Convention and all that shit, you're not fighting the same war that your enemy is fighting. I promise you, you're not.
I lived in the gray area.
You have to.
I had to.
You know, I mean, at the end of the day, whatever everybody's story was when they got back is what happened. But you know, the truth of the matter is, if you want to come back, if you want to go home at the end of the day, you better know those areas.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So I don't blame them for operating in that area. The part that I think is shitty is everybody they deal with, they encounter on a day to day, from the time they get up to the time they go back home, hates them.
Oh yeah.
Their boss is pissed because the crime rates are up and their arrests are down. The people they're arresting are, you know, writing tickets because the towns can't function without the revenue, is treating them like shit. You know, they don't encounter anybody that's happy. You know, so
Right.
you know, even when they get called, you know, and they get out there and they're like, "What the hell took you so long?" They're not even happy to see you when they call you and ask for help. You know, I mean, I'm sorry, I got here in 3 minutes, not 2. My bad.
Yeah.
You know,
EMS, we face that same problem. They call us and it's, oh, well, it took you too long to get here. What took you so long? Well, I just drove 38 miles to get here.
I only had 2-3 minutes left on this last episode. Leave me alone.
It's okay. I got 5 minutes to get out the door, so that's fine.
Yeah, I just, like I said, man, my hat's off to you for being able to continue to do it. There's no way I could.
We're not people.
We're not.
We're not people. Well, I didn't think.
I could see you walking through the door with a fucking first aid kit that consists of a Band-Aid and a straw, and you walk in and you're like, I don't give a fuck what you do with this, but the straw, you are going to use this to suck it up. Now get your ass up, candy ass. I could just see it, man. But my arm is still on the couch and I'm not there no more. Well, you don't need the damn arm, buddy.
Here's a tourniquet. But my arm's gone. Wrap it around your neck, bitch.
Yeah. Doug, you would not make it in this service industry.
I'm surprised I'm making the civilian world right now.
Well,
call it the boo-boo truck.
The boo-boo truck, the ambulance, the
ambulance.
I call it the meat wagon.
Candy-itis. Oh, the meat wagon. Yeah.
It's Uber with a number you can memorize.
There you go.
That's good, man.
Yeah.
That is good. Where I really needed to go is next to that hospital anyway. So I'll just call the Uber 911.
Uber.
Tell them I have a burning vagina. And I'll be able to meet my mom at the Starbucks next to the hospital.
Oh, no.
It's a good idea, man.
We have patients that live, probably, stay like 15 miles from the hospital, and they'll be on like dialysis, and they'll call it like 2:00 in the morning for us to take them into the ER, knowing that the ER is going to take about 4 hours, and then they'll get discharged from the ER about 5, 6 in the morning because their dialysis appointment, which is on the other side of town, which they can walk to, starts at 7.
Wow.
Mm.
I thought we were joking, but I didn't know people really did do that.
Yeah.
Hey, I almost forgot, but before we end this, there is one more story I want you to tell, man. Do you remember the story you told me about the old man that you used to go to and just sit at his front porch and talk to after a few calls that you had with him?
I don't remember that story.
So you told me there was an older gentleman. I don't remember if he was prior military or not, but he used to get calls, and it was basically just because he was lonely, and you guys would come out there and there was nothing, and then after a while, in between calls when nothing was going on, you would just show up out at his house and just sit on the front porch and talk to him for a while.
Oh yeah, that he was prior military. Yeah.
Was he?
Yeah. He had a lot of like weird mental things, kind of creepy.
Yeah.
A lot creepy. But yeah, he would call randomly throughout the day, throughout the weeks, because he would get lonely because he had nobody there. He had no family around, had no kids, no real friends. So he would call because he got lonely and he just didn't know what to do. So he would just call and, well, you called, somebody's going to come.
Yeah.
And so we would show up because he would always make it sound, I think the cops initially were showing up. And then he was like, well, the cops are dicks. So we're going to make this medical. So we would show up and we would sit on his front porch with him for half hour, 45 minutes, bullshit with him, talk with him. Like, he had some of the craziest freaking stories. And then he would be like, yeah, I don't need to go. And he'd sign a refusal and we would leave. And we did this for a couple of months until we were like, look, man, like between calls, we'll just stop by. We'll see how you're doing. Like,
we're not I'm gonna tell you, man, that tells you what kind of person you are. You know, somebody that you know, you're doing this just because one, you know, he obviously has nobody to check on him, you know, and in your spare time, man, you're spending hours making another guy happy. You know, that's awesome, dude. When I heard you tell me that story, I mean, that kind of warmed my heart thinking the kind of people that's still out there, you know.
So
yeah, so there's a few of us that are not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, man. Well,
so Doug, Becca wanted me to ask you if you still solve your problems playing tic-tac-toe.
If I play tic-tac-toe.
Yeah. With your wife.
Yeah.
Doug, not guys.
How about you, Doug? Do you remember the marriage retreat that we went to in Savannah on the river? I think it was on the river. This is my Doug story.
You went to a marriage retreat, huh?
You went to a marriage retreat, and first off, I think it was Blanchard or somebody was supposed to be there and they didn't show up.
Mike Payne.
Oh, it was Mike Payne.
Motorcycle.
Yeah, he was supposed to be there. He didn't show up. So Doug's already pissed. He's irate. And I was like, well, I know somebody that might come. And he's like, you better call him now. And I'm like, how am I getting yelled at on a weekend? What's going on here? So Henry Moss and his wife came out. So we come walking in on a Saturday, and the chaplain's like, so how do we solve our marriage problem? So when you have an issue with your wife, and he gives out some examples, and he goes, well, me and my wife, we played tic-tac-toe.
No, they were not doing their workbook.
The look on Doug's face when he was like tic-tac-toe was priceless. So then we had to do this like, oh, work on the workbook and play tic-tac-toe. And Doug ended up getting yelled at by the chaplain for not doing his tic-tac-toe workbook.
That's probably why I got divorced.
You always got beat at tic-tac-toe and got pissed and said, I'm out of here.
Because I wouldn't do the workbook.
Like you had to explain like what part of the car your marriage was and how you took care of it or something like that. And he's sitting in the corner playing tic-tac-toe.
You don't even remember being there, do you?
I don't even remember being there, actually.
Was you sober on this marriage retreat?
I don't know now. I don't know.
That is funny, man. I never heard that story before.
I don't know. When we left there, we ended up getting divorced. So, you've never heard that story because I don't remember that story.
There too.
So I can't even call him a liar.
Moss was one of my soldiers. How has he never told me this story?
Because you.
I don't know.
They gave us rooms next to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's my Doug story.
No.
I mean, there's 1,000 Doug stories about his eyes, you know, and then the old Doug Norris Porta-John stories.
I almost got him one of those like, desk nameplates that said Doug Norris.
I still want to have our electricians make the name tags for people's offices. Mm-hmm. And Doug, I guess his name tag was coming down, and one day he was walking his office. He said, well, it don't matter, I'm about to get fired anyways. He grabbed his name tape and just ripped it the rest of the way off the wall. So I've been wanting to have them make a Norris name tape.
We could put one on your mailbox at home. It'll really confuse everybody.
Yeah,
they're confused here anyway. So
you should have seen the drunks that paved their road. That shit was funny.
Can't be any worse than our drunks that painted the lines on the road. They went around a dead deer.
No, I think they win.
That's funny.
It's too, it would have been funny if they would have went all the way around the deer.
Made an outline.
Made a chalk outline, like paint outline around the deer. That's awesome.
That is funny.
I'd ask me, it was the fog line. I'm like, so do I have to follow the fog line, or like?
And y'all got some pretty big deer, man. You probably lost about 3 feet in the. Yep. Your lane went down to 5 foot.
Yeah, our deer are pretty big. I got a deer when I first got out of the military. I went hunting again, and went field dressed. It was 185 pounds.
Wow! Yeah.
Not like
definitely.
Not like the dog that they call whitetail in Georgia.
Yeah, no.
That's a great.
No.
I sent pictures of some does here to my son, and he's like, "Man, that is huge." Yeah, I know. The does here are like the size of your huge bucks back there, you know. And the doe I sent was an average doe. There nothing special about it. It's just what happened to pop up on my camera.
No, yeah, they were small. They were like puppy dogs with horns and shit.
Yeah.
In Georgia.
Yeah.
They weren't that big at all.
Yeah.
More excitement catching the gators.
Yeah. That's being down in the swamp, the hogs and the gators are probably the big deals in Georgia, in my opinion. You know.
Mm-hmm.
But just the gators weren't legal.
No.
Yeah.
Even if you're the infantry and you're on base.
If you were the infantry on base with the pond out back. Yeah.
Apparently, the gators love marshmallows.
Yeah, evidently.
And catfish.
Yeah. Everybody knows why we do this, man. So, I think this is a real good episode for people to see how transition affects people,
Oh yeah.
And how to relate the PTSD that goes through between first responders and the military, man. I think a lot of military guys don't realize it, that there is other forms of PTSD. They think they're in their own little group, and you start looking at the PTSD from sexual assault victims, first responders, just like he said, the symptoms are the same, but the way that people deal with them are differently, and you get that with Brooke Jackson's program. She's the veteran. She talks about that in our episode about how females deal with the PTSD completely different. They keep everything inside and they put that smile on, but internally, their life's a wreck
day after day.
Yeah. So everybody needs to understand, man, there is programs out there, and if the first thing you go through is the big VA and you go to the army doctors and everything else, and you don't get the results that you're expecting, don't think that that's the end. There's other programs out there. There's leavingthesidelines.org on the West Coast. They are out here to ensure that one day we do reach the goal of no suicides a day.
So Chief Rathbun's organization.
Chief Rathbun's. We have ourselves that you can reach out to. The suicide hotline, that is number hasn't changed, but they've shortened it to 988. Still extension 1 if you're a veteran. You can reach out to us if you just want somebody to talk to.
Support us at LaurieArmy.com.
Yep. You can see us on Facebook, whichever, if you're looking at something to do to take your mind off of it, there's Mo Vets Outdoors in Missouri. They offer a whole bunch of hunting trips and fishing trips and different stuff to help get your mind off that stuff.
Vetapalooza, September 10th, right?
Yeah, September 10th is Vetapalooza. If you're a veteran, it's $5. You get 2 concerts, a stand-up comedian.
What if you're not a veteran?
$25.
$25.
And
what's VIP?
If you are the big roller, the ones that buy the 93 octane, it's $100. But your food and drinks are all provided. It's donated from Anheuser-Busch and Rolling Smoke is providing the food. So all proceeds go to Vetapalooza and another veteran organization. I can't remember their name that is partnering with them on this. We will be there. If you come up and mention our podcast, you will get a tasty guest beer. Yeah.
We're not going to tell you what the guest beer is going to be yet.
But you will get your own guest beer. And if you want and you're not a drinker, we'll still give you that guest beer and we'll autograph it and you can put it on your wall. Yes, indeed. Man, this has been good. I think if anybody wants to contact us and want to be on the show, man, leave a comment. Reach out to us, email us, whatever. And y'all take care.